We'll give Colleen another minute to join us.
I am going to turn my camera off for a little bit because I just got home and I need to put a little food in my face, so that makes sense.
Okay.
So, Matt, because Madarima is not going to be here, should I be the secretary in fact?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right, here we go. We will call the meeting to order. Ted, since Madarima is sick and not going to make the meeting, could you please take the role as acting secretary?
Yes, Ted Foss is here. Matt Fruth.
Here.
Christina Rogers.
Here.
Colleen Burns.
Here.
Susan Fairfax may still be feeding her face, as she said.
I'm here.
Okay.
And it's here.
And I missed somebody.
Virginia, I'm here.
I'm saying, hi, Virginia. Sorry.
Okay. We now thank you for taking the role. Madarima is absent, and we will. Is there a motion to conduct our meeting virtually?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Ted, will you take the roll call vote on that, please?
Yes, please. To engage this as a Zoom meeting, Virginia Bloom.
Yes.
Theodore Foss, yes. Matt Fruth.
Yes.
Christina Rogers.
Yes.
Colleen Burns.
Yes.
Suzanne Fairfax.
Yes.
We now have authorized to meet virtually. We have several sets of minutes before us. One of our regular meeting and then 4 special meetings. Are there any questions or corrections to any of those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve all of the minutes in one roll call vote? Kelly?
So I was absent for the July 26th meeting. So
Okay.
I will abstain from the vote. If we do it as a packet, I just want to make sure all my fellow trustees understand why I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Understood. Is there a motion to approve the 5 sets of minutes together?
So moved.
Moved by Ted. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christina. Is there any further discussion?
Just with
I don't know if this matters, but I would also have to abstain because I was not there for the August 1st or 2nd meetings.
Okay, in that case, let's Ted, if you would withdraw your motion, we'll do them individually just so that we don't end up with an issue of enough abstentions to invalidate the vote.
Okay. So then I will start. First, I have a question. When there are little typos, we don't need to deal with those in the board meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, the corrections would be matters of fact.
Correct.
Matters of events. grammatical items can be addressed offline and those are not as, don't need to be represented.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So we will now approve the 5 minutes,
Just the first one, just the June 26th.
the June 26th. I'm sorry, we will deal with each of these separately.
Yeah.
So,
Is there a motion to approve the June 26th meeting?
July 26th, Matt.
Oh, you are correct, July 26th. I was reading off the minutes, so it is listed there as June 26th, but it was in fact July 26th. Is there a motion to approve the July 26th minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Virginia, seconded by Christina. Hearing no further discussion, Ted, will you take the roll call, please?
yes, for the July 26th meeting, Virginia Bloom,
Yes.
Ted Foss, yes. Matt Fruth,
Yes.
Christina Rogers,
Yes.
Colleen Burns,
I will abstain.
Suzanne Fairfax.
Yes. Okay. That is passed. Those minutes are approved. The August 1st meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Christina. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Sorry.
Seconded by Colleen. Thank you. If there's no discussion, Ted, will you take the roll call, please?
Yes, for the August 1st meeting, approval of the minutes, Virginia Bloom,
I'll be abstaining.
Theodore Foss, yes. Matt Fruth,
Yes.
Christina Rogers,
Yes.
Colleen Burns,
Yes.
Suzanne Fairfax.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all. Next up, those minutes are approved. Next up is August 2nd special meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Moved by Colleen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Christina. If there's no discussion, Ted, will you take the roll, please?
Yes, for approval of minutes of August 2nd, 2022, Virginia Bloom,
Abstaining.
Theodore Foss, yes. Matt Fruth,
Yes.
Christina Rogers,
Yes.
Colleen Burns,
Yes.
Suzanne Fairfax.
Yes.
Okay. Those minutes are approved. Does anyone plan on abstaining from the 8th or the 15th? Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the 8th and the 15th as a joint motion?
Ted Foss moves.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Ted. Hearing no further discussion, Ted, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, for the August 8th and August 15th virtual special meetings agenda, minutes approval, Virginia Bloom.
Yes.
Ted Foss, yes. Matt Fruth,
Yes.
Christina Rogers,
Yes.
Colleen Burns,
Yes.
Suzanne Fairfax.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Those minutes are approved. Public comments. I received one comment via email. Let me pull that up, and I'll do that first before we engage the folks who are here. There was a comment from Linda Ivy Miller related. The comments are, I work as a library assistant in the Mays branch and at the main library. I wrote the attached letter last October after we stopped providing the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal at the branches. I did so in an attempt to collect my thoughts and politely express my frustration with the decision. Thank you for considering my opinion. I have forwarded the document to the rest of the board as well as Jody, so that it would be attached to the minutes as an addendum. And so those will be included. Are there any guests here who would like to make a public comment at this time?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like to make a public comment.
Okay, just a moment. I see Rory, is that you, I believe?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, I saw you put your hand up in the Zoom before Peggy spoke, so I will grant you first. You can make your public comment now.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Thank you for hearing me out tonight, everybody. My reason for speaking to you tonight is to respectfully offer an experienced assessment of the status of the cleaning taking place at the 3 branches of our library. In particular, I will be talking to you about our floors. I will repeatedly use the word serviced. Serviced means by contract that the floors will be stripped once and sealed twice in the contract year. I present to you these facts. The cork floor in the Dole branch has not been serviced in 3 years. The hard surface flooring at the Mays branch has not been serviced in 3 years. As for the main branch, the Echo surface floors on the staff side of the main branch have not been serviced in 3 years. The book sorting room on the first floor, heavily trafficked area of our library, has not been serviced in 3 years. The staff offices on all floors has not been serviced in 3 years. The floors on elevators number 2 and number 3 have not been serviced in 3 years. The terrazzo floors in all the restrooms, both public and staff, have not been serviced in 3 years. The Echo surface flooring in the 3rd floor public side was serviced last January and resulted in extensive damage that, among other problems, knocked out data and communications on that floor. I placed a stop work order to show Alpha officials the damage and was promised that the problems would be corrected and not repeated. The sealant placed was done only once and is completely inadequate, and there has been no further work on that floor. The Echo surface flooring on the 2nd floor was stripped and only stripped this past June, and the same extensive damages that took place on the 3rd floor in January were repeated. As of this meeting right now, the 2nd floor has no sealant at all, in spite of the terms of the contract. Last fact I'm going to offer, the 1st floor Echo surface has not been serviced over the past contract year. Now, I have pointed out 10 facts here, but I can go on and on. Director of Operations, Jeremy Andrzejkowski, will verify these facts. This is now the 2nd consecutive cleaning contract that in complete and undeniable failure. Our once beautiful libraries are now showing the effects of neglect. We had a dedicated, reliable contractor who for 16 years did a wonderful job for our library. The decision to part ways with him was made against my experienced advice. I advise you as strongly as I can to not underestimate this situation. You can expect the cost of a contract to bring us up to acceptable standards to increase significantly. I will email these facts to Board President Matt Firth. I respectfully request that he share them with other members of the Library Board of Trustees. That's all I have to say tonight, folks, and I thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Peggy?
Yes. Good evening. I'm sorry if there's some background noise because I am outside. But I would like to read into the public comments what the signed petitions delivered to the interim executive director today stated. Between 145 and 150 of Oak Park citizens signed a petition with the headline, Older Adult Equity at Oak Park Public Library. And then the following, we, the undersigned, recognize that public libraries are in the difficult position of providing access to resources to their entire communities, which require redundancies. While many get their news and analysis online, others are in the lifelong habit of using traditional print newspapers. We petition the Oak Park Public Library to continue its commitment to print resources, including but not limited to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. Thank you very much for listening to my comments.
Thank you very much. Are there any other guests who would like to make a public comment on the record at this time? Hearing none, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, trustee comments and board calendar. Can we have that, the calendar brought up on the screen, please? Does anyone have any, the kind of the big item, or the one item of note on September is the elected officials barbecue on the 14th. I believe that it's at Pleasant Home. If you have not already received that information, let me know. I'll make sure to forward it on to you. Otherwise, does anyone else have any general comments related to items that are not on the agenda? Okay. Linda, I see that you raised your hand. Did you want to make a public comment?
Yeah, I apologize that I didn't get my hand up in time before. I'm wondering if we'll hear any discussion about the newspaper issue and if there will be any discussion amongst the board members.
There is an agenda item this evening related to that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. If there's no other trustee comments, we'll move on to staff reports. Strategic priorities. Lori, is there anything you'd like to discuss or highlight in the first part of this report?
No, just to say that the newspaper report is part of the strategic priorities report. So if any of you have questions about that, Barbara Fitzgerald, who is manager of collections, and Lee Tarullo, director of collections, are here tonight to take your questions.
Well, I'd like to turn it over to the staff to kind of make any, comments or introduction to that part of the report before opening it up to board questions. So Barbara and Lee.
I guess I would like to thank everyone for reading the report and formulating any questions you may have. I am excited to bring even more access to the news to our community. I acknowledge that, yes, this is a format change, but I think that we have the supports in place to meet our community members where they're at. And I look forward to taking any questions you may have.
Barbara, this is a question I asked Jody a little bit earlier today when I emailed her, but can you talk a little bit about the physical space that's being used for newspapers and if we have any plans for what that space will be converted to be used for?
Sure. I'm right now talking about the main branch. When we reopened in 2021, the branches, the newspapers, we scaled back to having the Oak Leaves Journal, Tribune, and Sun Times. So those are not that's not a lot of space, so that's not going to create space changes at the branches. We already made that space change to make a safe opening for the branches there. So at the main library, they are located on the 3rd floor, and they're on one shelving range over by the windows. And I know that there is a plan to move into that space some more study carrels, because we're finding our community is really using that space, study carrels there, and a table. So it's giving more access to the seating that patrons are really using. And we've done a study of walking through and watching how people are using the seating, and have found out that that's what the community wants. So that's what's going there.
I had a question about the cost of the subscriptions to the physical print that we were carrying up until this moment.
Sure. And the reason in June we start the process of looking at our budget, and we start the renewal process for our paper. So currently we subscribe to the Chicago Tribune, which is $925 per the paper per subscription for the year. The Chicago Sun-Times is $463. The New York Times is $1,265, and the Wall Street Journal is $452. We do not currently subscribe to the Wall Street Journal as a physical paper, only digitally, and we have not as far back as I could trace, but that was only 2010. So
thanks. Do we have physical copies of all the newspapers at the 3 branches, or up until now we did?
We have copies of the big newspapers at Maine. So the Trib, the Sun-Times, New York Times, Wall Street Journal are at Maine, along with the Oak Leaves and the Journal. And then at the branches, we just have local papers. So Chicago papers and local Oak Park.
Thanks.
And that has been for a year since we reopened in July after service level 3.
So Barbara, this sounds like it costs about a total of $5,000–6,000 to have the physical papers by subscription.
At one location.
At one location.
And then when you add, you have to add for every location.
Right. And then we have the cost of keeping those in line so that things aren't lost and all of that. But then we also have a number of very passionate patrons who like going to see the newspaper. So is it simply a matter of cost versus convenience? We've dealt with how technology can be used for people, but I'm very interested in the passionate response we've had to this issue.
I am interested in that too, and I hear that, but we have been tracking community's response since 2021, and we received one community complaint in 2021 about the New York Times and Wall Street Journal not being at the branches, and 2 staff conversations that I had with staff to explain beyond the talking points that we had when we reopened. It's also with the response digitally. Most of our community is using our digital newspapers. We have a huge response to that. And then when you realize I'm not hearing back from the community that we didn't have these at the branches, we have some delivery issues since, I think it's supply chain is what we're hearing, since we opened back up from COVID with delivery. We don't get complaints when the papers aren't coming to the library, and that's actually frequently. It's really hard to get a full week where each of our papers is delivered at Maine, and we're not hearing, oh, the paper's not here. And visually, we can only take visual cues. Unfortunately, with newspapers, they don't have a circulation because they're not checked out. They're for use when they're here. And so you can only do qualitative that we've been watching since the beginning of the year. We're not seeing regular people come into the library and use the paper. We're not tracking complaints about the paper not being here. And we're often, when we remove a paper, it's my team who does that, removing papers that haven't been touched, copies of the Wall Street Journal that have never been read. because they're in perfect condition. And I shouldn't just be calling out that newspaper. It could be any of the newspapers. That's just the one I said. So I hear a passionate response, but I've also had many conversations with community members that are in the library reading. Since January, I've been walking around and just talking to people, and I had most neutral responses. 2 responses, oh, I can read these from home on my computer. I didn't know you could do that. Then signing up for the class. And I had a great conversation last week with the gentleman who said, I love papers. This will be a change, but I understand why you're doing it.
Thank you, Barbara.
So I see that I think one of the as I look through some of the dialogue around this, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that the board sets a policy through our our policies, our published policies, and our budget. And our budget is materials and digital materials and print materials, and we turn it over to our professional staff to use that to implement practice and and procedures. And I would encourage staff going forward when discussing these things, as these are practices and procedures of our staff and not the policies. The board, and I think that just is a matter of created a level of confusion in the community over where this decision originated, because I think when people heard this is our new policy, they said, well, when did the board decide this? And this was a decision by the professional staff who we entrust to drive our collection. One of the things is, I was looking over the report, and the question I'll have for Barbara or Lee is, I see the data points in terms of this, and I think too, there was, once a department store in Oak Park, not Oak Park, it was right across Harlem, that started making really weird decisions. Weebolts that used to started making really weird decisions about what kind of clothes and styles they were going to have. And then people stopped shopping, and they were like, well, people don't want to shop in our store. They don't want to buy the clothes. And so they started changing what they offered, and not in terms of clothes, but other materials. And so is this a self-fulfilling prophecy of, are we creating our own data point in which to assess this on, or are we actually, and you talked through some of this before in terms of it's hard to collect quantitative data on some of those pieces, but your staff is reporting back and you are personally finding these things aren't being used. And is it one of those things where we're hearing from people who are, well, this is a thing that what we think a library should have, and therefore we want it? Or is it, a thing where, are we just not capturing it? One of those pieces where it's just, I just want to make sure that we're not, creating the curve as opposed to following the curve, if that makes sense.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. No, I hear what you're saying, and we tend to use the same data points for all of our collections, and format changes are hard. The world has changed drastically in the past 2 years, and we watch and we don't make rash decisions. Collection decisions are really intentional, and we really look at how our community is using our materials. And it's not been seen. I mean, I can't say that no one reads the newspapers. That would be a false statement, but anyone can come into the library and read the newspapers with this new collection strategy. This strategy allows people to walk into the library, get on a device, either their own device or a library device, and read the newspaper. So everyone still has access to the newspaper, and the added benefit of adding the two resources that we just got in July, which are the Washington Post digitally and the Wall Street Journal digitally, are that people that are unable to come into the library can still read the paper from the library. So I see that as a benefit, but I think most of the comments I have received from the public have been positive around this, other than very recently. And I hear those, and I will always listen to those, and we will watch and learn. But people still can come into the library and read the news. It is available to every person coming into the library. And we make format changes that are hard. When we moved away from VHS tapes, I'm sure that was hard. When we moved away from cassette tapes, it wasn't hard. I didn't work here, but I watched it happen in other libraries. It's hard. When we've changed platforms since I've been here, when we decided to move away from Freegal, that was a hard platform change, but we're able to support our music listeners with Hoopla. When we consolidated into Libby away from Access 360 and Cloud Library, those were platform changes, but have leveraged our budget better. And this is a move to strengthen what we can offer to our community moving forward. But as I said, our collection decisions are based on people using materials. And I think I saw Virginia ask it. If suddenly everyone came in and wanted to hold the paper in their hand and read it, we'd continue the conversation. We're always going to continue a conversation. But I would say to them, why don't you try? We have classes coming up on how to do this. We have devices you can check out. We have hotspots you can check out. We have devices in the library. Why don't we try this and see if that is meeting your needs? Because I do sign up people of all ages. I don't usually help patrons unless sometimes it's a weekend and no one here can do it. So I'll step in and help patrons. I have been helping patrons of all ages access our newspapers and they're very happy to be able to do that on the weekend. Or weekdays, I just don't usually get those.
Thank you, Barbara.
Any other board questions about this particular part of the report?
I'm really glad to hear the numbers about the cost, because I think that was the piece that was missing. It seemed like it was a duality choice of either electronic or print, without understanding kind of the actual cost. And I kept thinking, is there a way we could do both? But it does sound like it's a significant cost to do that. And if you're not seeing them being used, that makes a lot of sense to me. The other piece is, if we were to decide which print papers to have, which ones, to make sure that we have a broad representation. This is something that, so it's definitely something that I've been listening to when we've been hearing the comments. But just to reiterate it, for each branch, it would be $5,000 to $6,000 to have 3 papers. Is that right? Or to have 4 papers?
It is $4,410 to have the Chicago Tribune, Sun-Times, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and then adding the Washington Post, because we added it digitally, and that has become something that now is being asked for. Yes, and that would be per branch, and that's actually not, we also pay for the Oak Leaves and Journal, and I didn't include those because we are keeping those. Those are a much smaller payment, I think $400, but I didn't look it up, so I'm not sure.
So some of the stories that we've heard are about going to branch libraries. So if we did it just at Maine, then we would not be meeting the needs of people who have a habit of going to Maze. I think it's fair to say, let's try this and, at least try the digital. I also understand that there's something very different about holding a paper or holding a book. So I think the let's try and keeping it open is a valid response. And I really appreciate knowing the dollar amount, because that was without having that information, it was hard to kind of wrap our head around why we wouldn't. But that's a significant cost, especially when we're trying to get pay equity for employees.
I have a quick question, and I think this will be for Barbara, but I'm not 100% sure. You mentioned, now we're starting to add some other things now that we have digital access. Are there any other things now that we will be able to add because we're moving towards digital access, where we would have not been able to do something in print or not do something in print on a reliable time schedule? Because I know you mentioned supply issues with getting things on time. So I'm guessing if there's like a weekly publication of something, that's probably not going so great. But are there any other electronic things that we have waiting in the wings that we'd like to have that previously wasn't an option?
No, we were able to add those in this year. We did it knowing that we weren't, it's a weird budget thing, because then we aren't renewing. We got the actual digital access to the Wall Street Journal and Washington Post with the idea that we weren't going to move forward with the print newspapers, the physical newspapers at the library. So we already built that in. And we felt you won't see it until January, because the subscriptions we signed up for them in 2022, we signed up for in 2021.
Okay.
If there aren't any other board member questions, we can move on through to other staff reports of the library core use statistics.
I had a question about beekeeping.
Oh yeah.
I was curious. I just was jealous that there was a class about beekeeping, and I was curious whether or not there would be an opportunity to open up beekeeping knowledge to the community.
Sure. Jeremy arranged this training session. Jeremy, what do you think? Would our beekeeper do this for the community, or was this just a staff opportunity?
This particular training was for staff. It was outsourced. We had our beekeeper has been asking for a little bit of assistance. So we wanted to make sure that any of this, give the opportunity to staff. I think there were quite a few people enthusiastic to participate in that and to help out. And then the beekeeper was talking about kind of a more advanced training for them. I don't think our volunteer beekeeper felt comfortable doing the training herself. So she connected us with the Garfield Park Conservatory, and we had somebody come from there and they did the full training. So that's certainly a connection that we could do for the public. I mean, I'm sure I could reach out. I think the program was well received by staff and looked pretty interesting, even going through some of the PowerPoints and all of that. So it was a pretty in-depth program. And so we could certainly reach out and have them come back. I think the cost was pretty, pretty low for that kind of training. And I think they'd be open to that.
Sure.
Now I think the one caveat I would note is, just as far as like public on the green roof, that would be the one thing, is looking at any kind of liability that we would have.
I had remembered that, Jeremy. So it's okay if it's not on the roof. Just yeah.
Well, this was a classroom.
That's important.
Program. Yeah,
right?
So this was a classroom program. So yeah, I think it's. I would throw that back to Lori as far as programming.
Yeah, Alex just texted me and said we could cover it with adult services programming money. So.
And this would also, could this be something we reach out and do a collaboration with either the park district or the village, because they also have bees, that I think this could be like a good collaboration program to, you know, cross market and cross offer, you know, in various ways. So I think this would be awesome.
Yeah. That's a cool idea, Matt. You know, I'd be happy to take it to iGov the next meeting because, you know, iGov, as you all know, has been really leaning into conversations about sustainability, and it might be an interesting piece to that puzzle.
They were writing an article. One of the articles was going to be about the beekeeping, and I connected them with folks through Lori, I believe, with the library. So I don't know if that article has happened yet. Colleen, do you know? Because I missed the last meeting.
It's in my notes, which I will give in my iGov report, but I believe it is the next meeting. September is bees. Yep, September is bees.
And I believe that the bee cam in the lobby has really helped to get community interest. And also, I've been talking to people about the growing of tomatoes. It's really fun to deal with the community about these issues.
The one comment I would make on the tying the beekeeping to sustainability is there are some arguments and some local groups who feel that honeybees are agricultural and that they're kind of an invasive species or sort of there's potential for hurting native bee species. So just be aware of that as we move forward with that, and it becomes more and more kind of public. You just need to know where those are. When we installed the hives, I was doing research with University of Minnesota, University of Illinois to find out some of these details to gather up responses for concerns that people had brought up on that. So just be aware of that as we talk about tying the beekeeping closely with sustainability.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Now on our core use statistics. Anything of note from staff that they want to draw our attention to?
Nothing really stood out for me in terms of the July that was unexpected. I think it all is conforming to trend.
Okay. All right.
And the community outreach and program attendance kind of both went down from June to July. Is that expected? Is that summer?
Yeah, there's typically a big surge right when school gets out and the programs are very well attended, and it kind of drops off through the summer. So it's still held strong, but it's not as big a month as June.
Okay. If there's no other questions about the statistics, we'll move on to our the additions and terminations for staff.
Hey, Lori, or actually maybe Jeremy, can you talk a little bit about the move of the facilities responsibilities from Jeremy to Elizabeth, and how we came to have technology and facilities under one person?
Well, this isn't something I can really share in the public meeting. These were made for personnel reasons.
Lori talked with me about it to kind of give me a briefing and a heads up. I think that if having this conversation one-on-one with Lori would probably be advisable for those with questions about some of that rearrangement.
And we do have a new manager of facilities services. That's on page 17.
Yes.
Yeah, Ted, that was one of the reasons I asked. It was like we got somebody and then moved the department, so. I was
Well,
just about what was moving around.
Virginia, we hired someone, they worked for one day and they left, and then we hired someone else. So this is part of the situation that we were
Okay.
working with.
Okay.
I would just comment on that, the new manager of facilities, I have full confidence in him. I was in on the interviews and he was one of the original candidates and excellent, outstanding background. And I have no doubt that he and Elizabeth will get things back on track. Very confident with him.
All right. With that, we'll go into our financial reports. And I think go ahead, Ted, I'm sorry.
Sorry, and Jeremy assures me that if the tax revenue does not come at the right time, we have enough of a cushion that we will be okay through February of 2023.
Yeah, on that note, we've been, Linda and I have been meeting with banks, met with some banks today. Oak Park Bank, the new bank that came up into what used to be Winbury's. And so met with them, met with Byline, who is our core bank for our core checking. And we have a couple of different options as far as maintaining funding levels if the tax distributions are delayed substantially into next year. So we have a couple options. I'll be discussing those with Linda Moore. I have another meeting with the third bank this Friday, and we'll have options for you to present. And most of these, I think, everything from a tax warrant to a line of credit. And then the bank today mentioned even borrowing from the village, that might be an option. So we'll look at all avenues that we can, that are open to us and see what is the best. And we'll bring that to the board. One of the things, if we do something like that, both particularly with the tax warrant and a line of credit, we will need a board resolution to take on that debt. Most of those will be short-term debt until we receive the tax funds, and then we would pay that off right away. So just be aware of that. If we do that, it would be something that we would want on the September board meeting to take action on, so we can be ready for the end of the year if it came to something where the tax distributions were delayed beyond February. And in particular, I mean, there's a couple different logistic issues with that. If it's delayed past January for a tax warrant, we can only borrow 85%. So we need to maintain some reserves. So we'll figure out all that and bring some information to the board at the next meeting.
Has anyone heard any information from the county assessor or the county treasurer's office as to where any projected timeline for those for the fall bill issuances? I have not heard anything downtown, so but I've been focused on other things, so I haven't been asking.
Linda got some information from Cook County, and it wasn't too much more than we already knew, that they're likely looking at delays going into next year. No other pertinent information. And then I also have an email out to Cook County assessor. I've not heard back up from him yet, but
Okay.
I'll reach out again.
Okay. All right. Any other board questions regarding our financial report?
I'm just scrolling through. I had highlighted some stuff last night. It might be in a later section.
Okay. All right. Well, we can jump back if need be for this. We'll move forward though to the resolution on disbursements, which is page 61.
There was, Matt, there was one question that I spoke to Jeremy about the corporate property replacement tax. And he explained that to me. I don't know if the other board members saw that huge amount of 302,000. And he explained what that was about.
Go ahead. Are there any questions about that from anyone? Okay. All right. Hearing none. Is there a motion? Let me do this. Are there any questions related to the report on disbursements? That goes from 61, page 61 through. It's just on page 61. We did not get, I missed that. I somehow missed that, jumped over that. We didn't get the full, did I miss that? We got the full register of transactions? I'm not seeing it here.
Jeremy, was that included in the report?
What are you looking for?
The full register of transactions for the disbursements, because all we have is the resolution and not the itemized list of disbursements.
Yeah, I think scroll up. I think you're looking at it right there. Is that what you're talking about? The cash
No,
disbursements?
Matt, I actually have all of those.
Oh, is it higher up? Okay.
Page 35 through page 59.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the way we
Okay,
tried to.
I jumped to the resolution and not the.
Yeah, the way we kind of set this up is the summary is at the top, and then as you go through the report, it's more and more detailed down to the cash disbursements, and then it's the resolution for the disbursements.
Okay. I'm used in my head. The resolution comes before the list of transactions, but that's fine. I was just turned around on the agenda because it was like I thought I saw it there when I was looking through this before. Okay. Are there any questions about the journal, the disbursements journal?
I think that is one place that I highlighted, and I think it's already been answered about the newspaper subscriptions that we still have that cost, even though we don't have, because what we subscribed to was decided in 2021, right?
Yeah.
On page 42. Like the Chicago Tribune.
Yes.
Okay.
Based off the report from staff, that's okay. Is there a motion to approve the resolution for the disbursements journal?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Colleen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Virginia. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
I do have a bit of discussion that we had a comment from public today about alpha building maintenance, and how should we deal with that? That's basically a staff matter, correct?
Correct. That contract is managed by the staff, and that contract and any renewals related to that are also handled by the staff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just comment on that if Lori don't mind. Just so the board is aware, we are looking at different options on how we surface the floor, and that's one of the issues that's been the delay. The way it was done before is not the standard recommended way that the manufacturer, the EcoSurface, the rubber flooring, that they recommend doing the floor. So that's one of the things that we were looking at, how we do the floor and what is the best way going forward. As Matt and Elizabeth take that over, I'm sure they'll get more information for the board as well on, and you'll see improvement throughout the library on that.
Okay. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, call the question. Ted, will you take the roll call vote, please?
Yes, please. On the matter of the new budgets as presented in the minutes, Theodore Foss, yes. Matt Fruth,
Yes.
Christina Rogers,
Yes.
Colleen Burns,
Yes.
Virginia Bloom,
Yes.
Suzanne Fairfax.
Yes.
All right, thank you all. That is approved. We'll move on to additional reports, iGov.
Okay, here we go. The bulk of the discussion the last time we went was the September 24th Sustainability Forum. It's going to be hosted at the high school from 9:30 to 11:30. The first half is going to be dedicated to digging into what's in the climate action plan, which was voted on and approved by the board, I believe, last month. They're also going to have a panel of members of the community who participated in affinity groups, like serve as a panel and have tables dedicated to different topics. So waste would be one, home energy systems, biodiversity, transportation, and the like, so that members of the community can kind of bounce around, almost like speed dating was how it was described. The other thing that we talked about was iGov's future Wednesday journal articles. As we've talked about in the past, iGov has been publishing a series of articles in the Wednesday journal. September, as I mentioned, is going to be bees, and we talked about topics for upcoming. We were thinking for October, we could do a summary of that sustainability forum. November, there was talk of it being about the impact on the Reduce Inflation Act, but RIA. And then December, there was a talk about having it be about heat pumps, which is a new technology I was not aware of, but sounds like it's making progress. Anyways, then we moved to talk about the spring forum. As in past years, the spring forum has largely been around the election cycle and providing valuable information to the community about what it means to serve on a board. There's a lot of talk about timing for that. Is it for people who are thinking about running for office, or is it, you know, if it's in the spring, then it's people who have already filed. And then we usually do a roundtable at the end where everybody goes around and says a few things. From the village, there's $8 million left in ARPA funding, and they're hoping that it can largely go to implementation of the climate action plan. They have a consultant that they've engaged on policing. It's been a year-long consultation, and there's a recommendation in there about mental health 911. So that would replace, 911 for calls about mental health crises. From the township, the senior services, the township is working on setting a date to reopen the senior center, which would be huge. D97, they have formed a COVID mitigation and response team, and they are working diligently on monitoring the teacher shortage that is plaguing most school districts. And then Park District reported on they have plans for an early spring ribbon cutting for the community recreation center, which is very exciting. And that's it for my go.
Colleen, can I ask you a question about it? Was there discussion about the articles about whether to list the names of the people who write them versus just iGov?
There was, and I think there was consensus that in future that there will be a byline from where whoever penned the article. Yeah.
Good.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
that.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad to hear it.
Okay. COG did not meet since our last meeting. As for the ILA legislative and advocacy, my term on that committee has expired, and the new ILA leadership chose to appoint someone new. So I will no longer be on that committee moving forward. So we won't be getting that report. I'll try and keep on top of those, anything related to legislative questions that comes up as we move forward into the veto session for the fall, and of course next year with whomever our next governor is, because I'm sure there will be. There was a dessert crisis I needed to address. So that will be on top of that, because I'm sure a lot of consternation about who the governor will be next year. The Planet Green, Ted.
Yes, Jeremy and I were on the call last Thursday, and one of the wonderful things about Planet Green is that we're working with the whole community in same ways that iGov has. And one of the things I took away from the meeting is that we can learn from our sister institutions here at the village about how to save money and how to look for new ways to find government grants or whatever. And it was really a very useful meeting. Don't you think, Jeremy?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's always good to get together and see what the other agencies, and there's a handful of faith-based organizations. It's just a really strong community group looking at every option that's available for sustainability.
That's a sucker. Okay, we'll move on to Friends of the Library.
Yeah, the Friends of the Library had a great debrief meeting on the book fair, which was fantastic. I think they were genuinely shocked at how much money they made. They profited $17,000, which was double or more than they did at the high school in the last year they did the high school, because the expenses of being at the high school are so much a part of their delivering the fair. They did better at the library. So they made $19,000, they netted 17, and they were super happy, and they're like, let's just keep doing it at the library. So that was great. There are some tweaks that we want to make to have a smoother fair next year. This was an experiment, and there were some bumps along the way, but it was a real masterclass in volunteer organization, I have to say. The president of the Friends was fantastic. He was here every day working with people to pull the fair off. And I don't know if any of you were there, but I know people think of Oak Park as a small town, but I had such a small town vibe that day. It just felt like all these people are pitching in to bring off this awesome fair. And it was lovely. So there's going to be a volunteer appreciation party, pizza party in September. And then I imagine Russ will start thinking about next year. We're looking at a May or June fair potentially. It was really hot working in the donation room, accepting donations this summer in August, and that was a drawback. So that's one of the things we want to tweak, maybe have kids getting books ahead of summer reading. It would be a great timing if we could have the fair in May. So those are under consideration. So yeah, he also said he would love a representative from the library board to get to attend these meetings. I think that's, there's supposed to be a standing board member on their board. So I hope you all can pick someone to join those meetings. So yeah, that's it. Does anybody have a question about the fair or anything?
Yeah, Lori, I know at one time they were talking about doing multiple small book fairs. Now that they've seen the success of this one inside the library, is that something they're still considering doing this, twice a year or quarterly moving forward?
I think it's a possibility. I think they want to maybe do an annual fair again and see how that works. It's a lot of work to bring it off. And one of the things that they realized though was they could reduce the donation time to just a month and get enough to have the fair. We got more than we could actually, even put out. So so that's a possibility for multiple times a year, because if you can collect for a month, you can have the fair, we could easily consider doing smaller fairs. So yeah, I think that's on the table. It wasn't too disruptive either. I got no complaints, even though there were stacks of boxes everywhere in the library. People were not complaining. I think it actually drove people to the fair because they knew what was coming, and I think it was like advertising for the fair. So yeah, I was very pleased with it.
Great. Anything else? Okay.
How often does that committee meet again?
It's every other month.
And just as a general question for the board, I guess, do we as a board, what are there like term limits, or how does it get decided? Like if you have your eye on one committee, how does that all work?
Typically these liaison appointment positions are, will be for 2 years. And then after the election happens and we choose new board officers, we kind of re-examine if anybody wants to move around. Of course, if someone's personal circumstances change, where they need, what their availability doesn't match up, we can of course make adjustments. But generally it's over a 2-year, that current configuration of the board.
So then would the Oak Park Friends one just be up until the next election cycle, or is that what you're
Generally,
saying?
yes. Yeah. I
think if that's the case, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Christina.
No worries. It was a really cool event. I stopped by, and dropping off the books, all of it was great, beginning to end.
Thank you, Christina.
So now we will move on to unfinished business, our executive director search. To bring us up to date with everyone in attendance, the trustees conducted 3 virtual Zoom interviews with candidates and have met with our consultant, now the Blackberry Collective, formerly of Rashida Graham Washington, RGW. Over this past weekend, we received a communication from Rashida stating that that she feels that it is no longer tenable for her to continue working with us to complete this project. And so at this point, we will need to evaluate how we proceed moving forward without their services. Earlier today, I reached out to Alice Calabrese-Berry, who was the consultant when we last searched for an executive director, and that resulted in us hiring David. And I kind of brought her up to speed with what has happened. She would be open to helping us with reviewing the pool of 40 candidates, looking at who we have, as well as sitting down with the board. She would prefer in person, to kind of bring us, as she described, bring us together to kind of reset the board's mentality around this. Her initial thought was that it would be best if to not start back at square one with a search, but to look at another look through those 40 candidates. She has not, she's helped a number of other libraries in the Chicago area. She was a former director of the Chicago Public Library, the former director of the Metropolitan Library System. Before that, got merged into Rails system, and has helped us before. We are under, I made no promises to her. I said, I mentioned this conversation to her. I also did reach out to HR Source, who was another one of our finalists for consultants at the beginning of the year, to see if, they withdrew because they pulled in another contract while we were discussing with them after John Keister resigned. And they have not gotten back to me. I've not heard back from them one way or the other, but I just reached out to them to see if they had the staff bandwidth in which that they would be open to discussing with us, helping us conclude this process, but have not heard back from them. So I just wanted to let everyone know what conversations I have had since receiving the information from Rashida, but I'll open up the floor to the rest of the board.
So at this point, we have paid $28,000 for a failed search, and under the approved minutes that we had, we spent 486% of our recruitment budget. And you're saying that we have now 40 candidates that the RGW has given us, and so where do we go from here?
I would like for us to see if it's possible to have is this something that we can do in a closed session meeting? And schedule that soon so that we can have a full board conversation about that. That's something that I would like to do kind of soon. And I don't think that we should be using language like failed search. So that's my input at this point. I think things are more nuanced than that.
Sure.
Thank you, Susanna, and I withdraw failed search.
Well, I think it's, to Ted, to your point about the recruitment budget, that budget line was set before we knew of David's departure. So that budget line was not created with the intent of having an executive director search. So your point is well taken that we have spent the money, but I also would like to make sure that it's framed correctly in terms of comparing those funds. I would wonder is, as we move forward with this, I'm fine with scheduling seeing what everyone's availability is, and I can poll the board in Matarima what folks' availability are in the near future for a closed session. to move forward on this. Unfortunately, by the time we received Rashida's email on Saturday, it was too late to add a closed session to the agenda for tonight because of the open meetings requirements for that, under my understanding. So what, is the board amenable to sharing our pool of candidates, applicants with Alice Calabrese-Berry to have her do a review of that to provide us with at least some initial thoughts on what that pool looks like to help get us an assessment of where she thinks we are at in terms of the pool of applicants.
I mean, I have a question. When you're saying doing an assessment of the pool, is she doing an assessment of the full pool and whether or not she thinks that's representative of what we should have seen, or looking for specific candidates within the existing pool?
My conversation was her with just, I believe it was describing, looking at the pool to see if there were, any standouts beyond the ones that had already been brought to the board, and kind of, I didn't give her specific names of anybody who had been brought up by RGW to us. So she would be going in blind to that to see who she thinks would be any potential standout candidates for us to consider interviewing.
And Matt,
Did we not just do that?
We did, amongst the board, we did. I just reached out to Alice because, as someone who has helped us with a search before, I wanted to kind of get a sense of her, take on what had happened without going into, information that was discussed during closed sessions, and get her perspective on it, and also to see if she would be open to stepping in to help work with us to complete this search process.
I have some trepidation in bringing in another person from from outside of the process, especially this late in the process, to pick up where, the search firm that we chose left off. I'm eager to hear anybody else's thoughts. If she's going to be looking through to review the things, review the applicants that are in that pool, I feel like we've done that pretty thoroughly.
I agree, Virginia. I feel like I think it's one thing if we were to say, like, we want to conduct additional interviews with the people that we've said maybe we'd like to give a shot, but to start back at the 40 seems like a duplication to me. And it also, like, to me, I don't know. I think Rashida's email really affected me, and I am thinking about, like, how we are kind of questioning the expertise, and, like, that really doesn't sit well with me. Like, to go back to the beginning is suggesting that they didn't actually, look at these candidates thoroughly. And so to me, like, it's one thing if we were to say we have 3 more candidates from our pool that we'd want to interview, but to do any more than that, I'm pretty unsure about.
Yeah, Christine, I agree with you there.
I also feel like that we as a board need to meet and talk before any more decisions are made as a full board, or as many people as can make it.
And I agree with
Like
Suzanne.
A complication is that we still do have this one person who's hanging on and who is potentially very much harmed by the fact that this has taken so long. So I do wonder, like, if we can make some sort of decision with regard to her, or like what to do with that.
Right, and that's why I think we need to have a meeting where we can have that full discussion, because it is about employment, and to look at our process and evaluate it together in all of its fullness. And soon, I can't remember how long we have to have for notice.
48 hours.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's do something in 48 hours if we can. I'm gonna, as I sent to Matt, this is a horrible time for me. I'm in crunch time at work. Our annual event, it's a foundation, our annual event is next Thursday. And then I leave for vacation the next day. But this is really important, and we need to get on this fast and meet as a board and connect together as a full board. I feel strongly about that. But I agree with you, Christina, that and we have not ruled her out. And that we don't want to possibly miss that. Yes, let's.
On that note, I would ask, what would we be open to bringing her in person, Jocelyn in person, and meeting with staff and the board in person in the process of reevaluating this little larger process. I mean, we've met with her, we've reviewed her credentials. And while this exchange with Rashida is definitely needs consideration and discussion, we still had a candidate, and to the point of not letting her hang out. I mean, how long do we revisit this process and still not do move in any way with that one person?
I wouldn't be opposed to her, coming in and meeting with, staff, some of us. I think that would be respectful at this point. Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but then, yeah.
I'd be very hesitant to do that. I think that's a big expense if it was somebody who could drive here, but that's a huge commitment given where we are. I think it would be a very difficult thing to ask.
I hear you, Colleen. I don't want you to think I don't hear you. I definitely do.
Any other thoughts?
Can we do a poll and see if we can get a closed session in before the end of the week?
Yeah, let's see. So I'm not available Thursday. And then of course there's the weekend, but would Friday evening be available?
Ted would be available Friday evening.
Yeah,
Colleen?
I can do that.
Matt, did you say Thursday was not an option?
Well, I mean,
I just didn't hear you. I just wanted.
yeah, no, it's, I have something right at 6 o'clock that I'm not sure how long it's gonna go.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
mean, we could meet later than 6:30 than we usually do. So if we want to do something at like, 7 or so, start at 7 or so, I could probably do Thursday.
I can do either Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, I'm fine with either of those options.
All right, let me see if I can.
I'm not sure we can do Thursday unless you start later than the time right now, right?
Oh, that's a good point.
Boy. Thank you, Lori.
Matt, you may be able to call a closed session and add it to this meeting. I'm not sure there is an issue with that. If you want to talk about this further, I think you could do that.
Oh. Okay. Well, it's true because it wouldn't involve a policy action.
Mhm. Yeah,
So-
because it's an employment issue, I think you can add it to this meeting. And we have a link that Elizabeth can send you all if you want to do that.
Okay. Yeah, let me message Matarima to see if she would be.
Thank
I mean,
you.
I think- All right, so I just shot her a message. We'll see if she says, but all right, so in the meantime, let's try and I think it's fair to say we can table any discussion regarding an evaluation tool. For that, we have and I don't have any updates related to a bylaw for reimbursement of childcare expenses at this time. And we can circle back to this, but I'd like to, in the hopes of hearing back from Matarima, I'd like to try and jump into the new business for the 2023 budget from staff. And we can jump back to the unfinished business and do a closed session. And Laura, if you could have Elizabeth send that link out for a closed session.
Yes, yes. All right, so this is the first of several conversations we're going to have about the budget. We need to approve the budget in October, and Billy and Jeremy have documents to share with you tonight and explain our thinking this year, what we feel is appropriate for the times, basically, the conditions that we're in terms of the cost of living increases and the impact that is having and should have on wages, and the impact that will have on the capital projects that we do and hire for. So I am going to turn it over to Billy to get started and explain the wages and salaries proposal. As you know, this is the biggest part of our budget. It has the largest impact. And so he's going to begin and explain his recommendations.
Yes, thank you, Lori. And thank you to the board for having me here. And I get to kick off this budget discussion. And I get to talk about what I think is the most important piece of our budget is our people. So, hey, Lori, I'm not sure who's doing the screen sharing, but if they can do the.
Elizabeth can, but I thought maybe you would want to, so you can show that you can point to the things you want to highlight.
Oh,
is that okay?
Certainly, yeah. I'll let me see here. Pull it up here and share the window. Are you seeing what looks like? Let's go back up to ideal and current distribution. Yes, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so before I jump into the charts and the data, I want to just kind of start by saying that this, all of what you see in the next 4 pages and what I'm going to cover today is a result of our annual and comprehensive review of internal and external compensation data. And the primary source of this compensation data is from HR Source. HR Source does a comprehensive compensation analysis and survey of libraries across Illinois, and we rely on that data for making these decisions. And so I'll walk you through this. And before I get into the charts too, I want to kind of preface this by saying that we know, I mean, if you've been listening to the news, if you're living in the world today, we know that we need to include pay increases for our staff in the 2023 budget. We know we need to increase pay. I'm here to show you the data to support that decision and our recommendation on what to do with these increases. So again, this is the first go at it. We're giving our first recommendation, and I'll take your questions along the way. But let's start with the ideal distribution. I use this chart every year, and so if you've been on the board for the last 5 years, you've heard me talk about this. If not, for those of you who are new, I want to talk about this ideal distribution chart. So ideal distribution, what does that mean, or why is this ideal? The library's compensation philosophy is to match the library market for rates for libraries with similar size budgets, libraries with similar number of employees, and population served. If we match the market perfectly, we would get this ideal distribution, this bell curve distribution. And that's kind of like a target that we shoot for. In the real world, we're not perfect, so we're not going to get this ideal distribution, but this is the goal that we're kind of shooting for. And then right below the ideal distribution chart, you can see the current distribution. Current distribution, what this is saying is, as of August 22nd, or I'm sorry, August 2022, so this month, if we didn't do anything and it all of a sudden it becomes 2023, and throughout 2023, the market is moving away from us. Other libraries are getting pay increases. They're processing the pay increases. Most of them process them either in July or in January. But as those increases get processed, the market keeps moving away from us. And so I'm taking our current data and saying, with the analysis that I was looking at, aging the data, we're looking at the 2023, the market's moving away from us. This is really just our justification of why we need to do pay increases every year, right? The market continues to move away from you. You need to do pay increases to match your compensation philosophy. So I'm gonna stop there for a second. Any questions on these? Any questions on these two charts, or anything I've said so far?
Not a question, but Billy, do you happen to have what our previous distribution was before this current one?
Do you mean like how we ended up last year, like at the end of last year, if we implemented the increases, where we would be, or which?
Yeah, not necessarily for us to look at today, but I think it would be helpful to, as we're doing this, to kind of look at the progression between last year, this year, and then the proposed for next year.
Yeah, so I can try to address that. What I think is, like, each year, so I looked at last year's presentation, and I actually used that as a basis for this presentation. And it was, we were in 2021, and I was aging it and using the 2022 market projections, and it was a similar start. We actually had more employees, I think, in the second quartile from where we were at, but it's a similar start. Basically, like, the market's moving away from us. It is, though, moving away at a rate of about 4 to 5% conservatively, is what I projected use for this data. The HR Source survey was from March of 2022, and at that point they were projecting about 4% pay increases. Since then, though, the average is coming up closer to 5, and I mean, I've seen surveys more recently with just through Rails with some other libraries, and yeah, they're ranging anywhere from a low of 3% to a high of 9% pay increases. So anyway, I'm talking a little bit ahead of myself because I want to show you the next chart too. But anyway, so but our all of this is to say there's reason to give pay increases, because we want to, if we want to continue to match the market, we're going to need to give pay increases to especially those people that are in the first quartile and the second quartile. Let's see here. I wanted to give you a little bit more information about who, like, what you're looking at here is the current distribution. It's the same current distribution chart from the previous page, but what we've layered in here is the pay grade data, like who's in what pay grade, and where do they fall within the different quartiles. Let's see here. And it just as like a reference point for you. So when I talk about pay grades 1 through 7, if you think about pay grade 1 is like our library clerks, and pay grade 7 is our leadership team. So if you want to know like where, like how the order is, we try not to have hierarchies, but we do when it comes to the pay grade here. And grade 4 is our librarian pay grade, so our librarian-like position. So just to give you a reference point. So I did this last year, and I liked how it kind of broke out, like, you know, where are all these, like who's in that first quartile, who's below range. First of all, we had 4 employees that were below range. It kind of shows you where those 4 employees are. They're all in grade 3. And what we did see when I was looking at the compensation analysis, the market data moved or increased more for the middle grades, like than it did for grades 1 or 7, but especially grade 3. And that was really interesting to me when I was discovering these moves. So like the minimum wage or closer, like the lower wage positions didn't move as much, but like the grade 3 supervisor, specialist type positions, those did move a lot in the market. And my guess behind it is that they were trying to, I think there's a market is correcting for some wage compression issues. And I think that we have an opportunity here to fix that as well, to push grade 3 employees farther away from grade 2 employees. We do have a lot of wage compression there. So I break it down by pay grade. And when we did this, it also was helpful when we look at the next page. Last year, we did a 2-tiered pay structure. Like we did a certain pay increase structure for like grades 1 and 2, and then a different pay increases for those who were in grades 3 through 7. I liked that last year, but when I looked at this year, I said, well, what do we really need? We really needed a multi-tiered market equity. Like each grade needed something different to get the progress that we needed to see in moving people up into additional, into other quartiles, from the first quartile to the second, and from the second quartile to the third. So we needed, let's say in this example, an 8% increase for grade 3, but only a 6% increase for grades 4 through 6. The minimum increase that we're recommending here is 4%, and the maximum you can see here is 8%. This recommendation includes an average pay increase. So if you average all the increases all together, the average pay increase is 5.9%. So for that 5.9%, if we implement it, what happens. Here's what happens. Here's the future distribution. This is assuming this, we implement those pay increases. It goes into effect on January 1st. Our future distribution is not a perfect bell curve. It's not a perfect bell curve. It does have, about 62% of our employees falling below the midpoint. But we were able to give pretty significant pay increases, let's say 6%, 8% to a lot of our employees, moving them up. And you can kind of look down through the pay grades and see like where people fall. And there's just a lot of wage compression happening. I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but in grade 2 and grade 4, that's library assistants and librarians and librarian-like positions. And the total cost for these increases, like my estimated cost for these increases is about $305,000 a year. So $305,000. I could get additional movement. I could spread out this 24. I could get some to come over to the third quartile. I could spread out in grade 4 some of these 22 and get them over to the third quartile. But in those examples or scenarios I was running, it was about $100,000 more annually. So I wanted to be a little bit more conservative and come in with what I thought was, appropriate. And it would be $305,000 annually, which is about a 5.4% increase to the wages and salaries line over the previous year. So anyway, I was comfortable presenting this number for reaction. So now I'm done. What's your reaction? So any other questions?
So Billy, we think that the COLA for next year is going to be about 8% in Social Security. So how does that figure with your 3.5% here?
3.5%. What the minimum that I'm looking at a staff person receiving is 4%.
Right.
That was the minimum for the library survey was projecting, and so I thought 4% would be the minimum conservative number to bring in here. I do realize though that cost of living and inflation numbers we do see those as higher, but recommending, let's say, a minimum of an 8% pay increase with other adjustments as needed. You're looking at over $500,000 of pay increases. And so I was giving a more conservative. It's weird when you say 4 to 8% sounds conservative. It's this is the first year I think that I've come in with these higher numbers in the first round of presenting it to the board. So I don't know if I answered your question, Ted, but I get what you're saying. These numbers aren't tied to inflation per se, or tied to COLA.
So they're not tied to COLA, and we all, those of us who are retired, will have a Social Security benefit that will probably be 8% more. But will we be able to get new talent and great talent at 4%?
So that's a good question. I'm basing this on library market data and what I think the library market will do, because again, our strategy is to match the library market. If I've got the average of the market of libraries is going up 5%, and our pay, even though it says minimum 4%, that 4% is really going to a small fraction of our employees, everyone who's over the midpoint, and then a few people who are in grades 6 and 7. But the average pay increase is actually 5.9%. So it's all of our staff members, the average pay increase is 5.9%. And you'll see, most of them are receiving somewhere between a 6 to 8%, depending on where they fall in their grade and in their range.
Thanks, Billy.
Yeah. And Ted, I'll just throw this out here. I'm happy to come back with an 8% minimum recommendation, but I I want more consensus from the board before I do that work.
What was the dollar amount you said that would be?
I'm guessing it's going to be over $500,000. So at least another $200,000. But I mean, but if that's at 8% minimum for everyone, I mean, that could be that. I don't know. It could be $750,000 if 8%, because if you're, depends on how you if it's 8% for everybody, or if it's trying to get to an 8% average. I think that would change how I'm looking at it. Let's go back here. So if this is costing us about 305,000, yeah, over 500,000 is my best guess. But I'm happy to run the numbers if you'd like to see that as an option.
I'm sorry, Billy, I know you've said this like 11 times. The average you said was 5.9%.
Yes, the average with this example in this recommendation, the average pay increase for staff is 5.9%, with a low of 4% and a high of 8%.
Now I have a question that I may have missed it, but HR source is one of the things that you're dealing with, Billy. Is that also the HR source that we're dealing with the executive director search?
It's the same company, yes, the same
Okay.
organization.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, we're members of HR Source, and they have a lot of data, a lot of information, and we rely on them for keeping updated on like workplace trends, changes in the laws. They're a great resource for us as a library. And any other questions about the recommendation? Anything else you'd like to see?
I don't have anything. I'm just, I'd like to at least give Billy and Lori, the staff, kind of a consensus whether this is, a direction that the board is comfortable going in as far as our budget for next year, so they can continue to build out and collect, the information for the other areas, insurance and benefits and, materials and all of the rest. So, is the board comfortable with them moving in this direction with the salary adjustments?
I think we did this once before, but Billy, would it be possible to see what would happen at maybe 2 different percentage increases?
Yeah, Virginia, can you give me a little bit more information? What
Yeah, like
you're looking for?
You were saying like across the board, this was going to be at 5.9. My brain just says 6. I'm not a numbers person. So like, would we be able to see what does the budget look like if we do 6% across the board versus what does it look like if we do the 8% across the board?
Like an average of 8%. Like right now I'm saying the average is 5.9, or let's say if the average is 6%. If I got that average up to 8%, what would that look like? I'm willing to adjust the numbers with the focus of moving more of the let's go back down here, moving perhaps maybe more of these grades 2, 3, and 4 staff above the second above.
I mean, or 7%. If you think 7% will do it, if 7% will uncompress some of those people, I'd just like to see what
Okay.
the
Yeah,
difference is in actual numbers between what looks like the recommendation you're giving us versus maybe trying to stay a little bit ahead of the economy, not knowing what's going to happen next year.
Yeah. Yeah, I can certainly look at the 7 and 8% scenarios and see what that does to the costs, the distributions. Yeah, I can take a look at that. I'll add here that, we're starting with, a lot of focus on staff, our current staff, and what pay increases we might be recommending. But it's one piece, right? It's one line. Like Jeremy's going to talk shortly about the rest of the budget and some placeholder numbers and some things that he thinks is going to happen with the budget. But also in the wages and salaries line, we have potential to, like, are we going to add positions in the next year to focus on some of our strategic priorities? Are we going to add to the benefits line? Are we going to add to professional development? We have to shake out all those lines too. So like this is a very specific piece, a very large, specific, and important piece of the budget, but it's just the one piece. So, but I'm happy to provide those other additional scenarios for you to consider at the next board meeting.
And Billy, my understanding of what you're saying is that, like, you kind of approach it from trying to achieve the bell curve, trying to achieve certain movement in certain areas, and then you get the number kind of afterwards, not so much like it's a number and then.
Correct. Yeah, I'm looking more towards the more towards the distribution, and that's where I came up with, and actually with Lori's idea. When I first heard the idea from Lori, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. The idea of creating a separate wage or increase structure for each pay grade, and I was like, that's going to be too complicated. But turns out it's actually what we needed in order to get the most movement. Because grade 3 needed different increases than grade 4 and different than grade 2. So it was hard to get something consistent. But in general, you can see that there are larger increases going to those who are in grades, what is that, 1 through 3, who are in the below range first quartile and second quartile, and smaller increases going to those that are in the higher pay grades that are in the second, third, and fourth quartile. So that's generally what I'm looking at, because that's what we need in order to get the bell curve distribution. Yeah.
So basically then what we need is just a couple different scenarios to compare and see kind of how you think they might do what you're aiming to do, right? Not necessarily.
Yeah. And I guess the reason I didn't do that in this scenario was because I wanted to see how you reacted to the price tag for this first one before I did all the work for those other two scenarios.
I understand that. I do that at work too.
So Billy, who determines what these pay grades are and what do they constitute?
So I mean, who determines it? It's me working with Lori, and we determine what the pay grade should be. But that is all market informed. So
the board votes on to approve this that pay schedule, correct?
So the salary schedule, or the salary and wage schedule, and the grade assignments is a staff tool to inform the budget discussions. It's not a board voted on. The grades are not set by the board, or at least historically they have not for the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, so, thank you.
Yeah, but it's all market informed though. So like the midpoint of grade 4 is projected to be about $62,000. So $62,000 a year for grade 4, which is librarian or librarian-like positions. So if that's your midpoint, $62,000, and you have, what is that, 26 employees that are below that $62,000. So that just to give you some numbers about what you're looking at, but that's a lot more detail that adds to this discussion. And I can include that data for the next round. That's actually what happened last year, is that we it was helpful to include the pay schedules and the grade assignments, so you could review those as well to see what positions are there and what the actual ranges are. So if you'd like to see that, I can include that as well.
Another thing that you said is, you said there's also, the idea of whether you're adding positions to meet strategic goals and professional development and benefits. And last year, I recall one of our big conversations was about the number of part-time employees who don't have health insurance, who don't have benefits, and hoping to work to shift that. So that's something that will show up in other numbers elsewhere. Is that right?
Correct. This will, you'll see it on when Jeremy starts, it starts for his piece of the presentation, you'll see the benefits line, but that's also a number that I focus on getting more detail on for the second round. Like the first iteration of the budget has a bunch of placeholder numbers, and then I'd start really looking at actual numbers for the second draft, which you'll see in September.
But to that point, I wouldn't want to necessarily look just at this and then exclude our focus that we were looking at last year about employees that don't have health insurance and wanting to move that needle.
Okay. All right. The next part.
Yeah, Jeremy, you're on deck to explain the rest of it.
All right. Let me go ahead and share basically the same document. Share. All right. I'll increase this a little bit so we can focus on this year. I just want to kind of walk through. This is the same spreadsheet that we've used in the previous years, certainly last year, but just walk you through at least this first page, and then the rest should kind of fall into place as far as viewing it. So 2023 budget, that's this line here, the column here. The 5% is the target. Lori and I talked about it along looking at with Billy's information that he put in as far as the people budget. And we said, okay, let's start about 5%. And this is basically a 5% levy increase for the library. So that would be the 10,227,382 is 5%. All of these others, this next one is Ted mentioned the corporate property replacement tax, or PPRT. Sorry about that. This, we received more this year, and the previous year as well. We received more than we expected. And what that is business is doing better during the pandemic than they expected. So that's where we got some of that additional funds from the businesses doing well. So I'm increasing that 20% to 150, just trying to be conservative because we don't know how that's gonna do next year if we're gonna get that same amount. The rest of these, looking at these increases, my focus really is looking at these ones here that are under $5,000. We're not even counting. We don't count on those. So I'm not putting any budget in there. These other numbers, if it's got a solid number in here and no calculation, that's just a number I'm looking at to try and increase it and match it with what we're projected to receive this year. So it's a conservative projection for next year. All of these other numbers going forward from 2024 projecting out through 2028, those are at a 2% increase in revenue. But then this top line here with the tax, property tax, So we have this in this spreadsheet shows 5% for next year. And then projecting forward is the 3%. That's this number here. So that's what this is basically assuming that the board will ask for a 3% going forward from 2024 forward. So that's kind of how this spreadsheet works out. With these numbers and a 5% tax levy increase for the library, revenue for next year would be 5.62 projected. All right. So then as we scroll down, or before I do that, let me show you here the average expense rate for going to 2023, just to kind of maintain that 5% level and balance between how much the proportion of the people budget to the rest of the budget. We're projecting a 5% increase in expenses. And that may be optimistic. A lot of the other expenses, what I'm seeing in some other government finance forums is anywhere from 7, to 14, with some vehicles and stuff being as high as 19% increase. So just to kind of get a watermark, we're going to start with this as a 5% increase on expenses, unless we have better information. And you'll see that as we go down. Projected forward, in these numbers here going forward, we're going to be optimistic. And we're saying, okay, after 2023, we're looking at 3% increase in expenses. So that's where this number is here. All right, so back to just the budget 2023. There's our revenue expectations with a 5% increase for the levy for the library. Then we go down through the expenses, and this first section is really Billy's game. These are the numbers that Billy projects out. So wages and salary increasing 8.4%, 8.04, pardon me. And then these are all the numbers that Billy projects out going out, and the total people budget increasing at 4.86, so just below the 5%. And those were with Billy's market data that he uses. Scrolling down through the other expenses, actually I can increase this, make it a little easier for everybody. Okay. So again, budget 2023. Some of these were projected to be over, so I made some adjustment on that. Publications, that right now is projected to be over, but once we get better information working with each individual manager or director within their areas, these numbers will be adjusted in September, and then October we will hopefully we'll have much better data going into these. So if you don't see the 5% general increase here, those are numbers that I think we're going to be over in those lines, or we have better information. You'll see that in the insurance where we have that projected to be over as well. And that's coming from the insurance, our insurance pool. So most of these here you'll see are relatively small numbers. Administration. These are some of the areas where you'll see the larger jumps. Postage and delivery, that I think we're doing out more mailings, but then also additional cost, so that we see going up 89%, but it's $4,450 difference from last year or from this year's budget. The big ones are insurance, that they projected out to be 20% increase. We were at 110 in this year's budget. And by my estimate at this point in the year, we'll be right around 100,000 expended for the year. So with that 20% on this number is where I get the 120, right? So that's kind of how I worked out through this whole process. So as you see these numbers here, I'll scroll down through. And if you have specific questions on any particular line, let me know, and I can tell you my thinking on that. So like library materials, I spoke a little bit with Barbara on the collection, and some of these numbers may be adjusted. Again, I'm just giving told her I was just gonna give a 5% because she doesn't have all those numbers yet for me. Looking at the additional cost within inflation and the cost of materials, some of these may be adjusted as well. Facilities, these are the numbers that I put in, so I'll work with Matt and Elizabeth to get better numbers on these. But the big ones that you'll see jumping on here are natural gas. This one, increasing 70%. That's the projected for this year for the gas prices. The other one that I think is
What's fuels and lubricants?
Fuels and lubricants is actually gasoline for the van. So that's something that we purchased from the village, and that too, you'll see the big jump in there. That is literally almost, I think it's 100% probably gasoline that we purchased through the village. So that one too, we're going to increase up. Again, a small portion of the whole, but you do see the numbers jump. Some of these I made some adjustments to try and balance this budget, where we look to be underspent on building materials and supplies. So to try and compensate for the increase in fuel, I'll reduce that a little bit. So I made some of those adjustments myself. So I'll work with Matt on that as well. The rest of these, I think you'll see parking lot expense. This one is high. We've been having issues with, am I looking at the right line here? No, so this is natural gas. Parking lot expense is projected to be lower, but that I want to look at as well to make sure that we have the expenses going into the right account line. So with that, facilities going up 5.79%. And then these last two sections here in operating, programming, and digital services, we're just projecting a flat 5% increase on those expenses. I'll work with Lori and her team to figure out like where are they on expenditures on here, and are we going to make some adjustments on here? Well, we'll see some differences. With all of that in place, the total increase in operating expenses is 5.15. And if you recall from the top, let me just scroll quickly. Sorry about the quick scroll. Oops, sorry. Here. So 5.62% increase in revenues is projected with a 5% increase in levy. And then if we go down back to the operating, so 5.15% in operating costs. So we are gaining some ground there on revenue versus expenses, at least for the operating. And if we add in the capital projects, you'll see a lot of decreases here. Some of these numbers are either flat or larger drops here for technology equipment. This is something I need to work with Martina and Elizabeth on to see what the projections are. And as I finish here, I'll show you the spreadsheets you'll see on down below, where we have projected out through 2028 on the technology that we need and the capital asset projects, the capital projects that we have going. That's where these numbers feed directly in from that spreadsheet. So IT projects, we'll see what they have going on, but at this point, what we had projected from last year in those projects, we're going to see a 50% decrease in expenditures for the IT capital, and then also a 50% decrease in capital for building improvements. This was the big jump here was this year for the access control system, which ends up to be about $350,000. And hopefully we'll close that project in September. So that's kind of where we're at with this. So total increase in capital expenditures for next year will only be 1.32%. All right.
I have a couple questions, if this is okay. I noticed the IMRF, the Municipal Retirement Fund, is a significant drop, and I vaguely remember some conversation about it, but I don't remember why. I don't remember what we talked about with that.
Yeah, so that's really set up. Billy might have better information on that. That's really calculations done by the village, working with their actuaries and IMRF, looking at what is our projected liability and what do we need to pay in to cover IMRF different periods. So at some points we've seen quite a high increases. In the past couple of years, we've seen increases because they've basically gotten a better return on that, on their investments for IMRF.
Okay, thanks. And then you talked about building improvements and that the access control was a big jump this year. Is that where the flooring that you were talking, that somebody was talking about comes in? That's in another category. Okay.
Yeah, the flooring is really custodial. Let me scroll back up to that. So flooring and facilities management, custodial services here, this row here. Currently, we're looking at spending in the budget this year is $205,000. I believe it's the highest contract, the largest contract that we have in the library on one single individual contract. Next year, projecting 5% increase. A big issue that custodial services have, of course, is labor costs, and then also for supplies cost. But that's something that could change. One of the things that we've been looking at doing is changing the way we do the floors, and there might be some savings long-term and be able to parse those out where the floor is done different from the regular custodial services. But I'll defer to Matt and Elizabeth on that. We'll see how that goes. But we might have a more durable solution where we don't have to do those floors as often. So that hopefully will save some, but again, this is something that they're going to be looking at as well.
And that's not the Matt who is the president of our board. That's the Matt who's facilities.
Yes, Matt Partocci. So yeah, I apologize. Thanks, Ted. Yes, our facilities manager, facility services. We'll be reviewing that, and they were actually meeting with Alpha today. So the one thing I commented incorrectly here. Let me go down. The total capital expenditures will be dropping over 40% this year, almost 42%, because of the big project that we had, access controls. And access controls is basically the security of getting into the building. So the card swipes, there used to be card swipes, now we have a more secure key fob. So as you go into the building, you don't have access into the staff area, but staff can swipe a card and get into that access. And we have a tiered level of access controls throughout the building, whether it's the penthouse, our special collections, the vault in the special collections room, different areas like that, where only certain people get access to that. Our IT and server room, that's a more secure area as well. So that's really what that access control is. And that's, we've had some enhancements on that as far as being able to manage that remotely. So if something happens, Billy can log in and make some adjustments, give somebody access if they need. And now we have access where they can, staff who are authorized can enter the building and it will disarm the alarm automatically when they enter the building. That's what that big project was. The other software that we had was not supported any longer. And so this had been on the queue as something critical that we could not put off. Because of that, we see a 42% increase in the capital, at least in these projections, without looking at in details at what we need going forward in 2023. Total library expenditure is 1.32 in this budget. So we have the increase of over 5% of revenue, and the total overall expenditure for the library budget is 1.32. All right, and then if you scroll down, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit too, so you can see more of it. I know they're tiny font, but these last couple of spreadsheets here, these are the projections that I built out with the capital asset study, working with the facilities manager and IT manager to say, what do we need to look at replacing and improving going forward over the next 4 or 5 years. So 2023, I need to adjust this spreadsheet here. So this will show what's getting done in 2023. And then as you scroll down, all of these numbers here, this total here, those feed up into the capital budgets line for building improvements in IT. Right, so you can see the projects that we have slated out for Maze and the main library as well. And if you scroll down, these are the IT projects they have slated out, projected out. All right. So then those numbers should feed up into this section here and here. And that's where you'll see those. Right. So in a nutshell, in this budget, expenditures, overall library expenditures will increase 1.32. And then I'll slide back up slowly. Nobody gets seasick. And the revenue projections with a 5% increase in levy will be total operating revenue projected, estimated 5.62. And so hopefully we can gain some ground on that. But then as you, let me scroll over a little bit. You can see we're still looking at hard years ahead to figure out how we balance the budget going ahead. Again, this number is excess from our target by policy, our target fund balance at the beginning of the year of 42%. This is excess capital that we could have going forward. And then you can see it starts diminishing as we go forward. Right. Any questions on any of that? The one other comment on the 5%, I did speak with the finance director at the village and talked to him a little bit about the 5% tax levy. You may or may not be aware, the village is, from the initial word that I heard is they may be looking at no increase in their levy. And that's because of, I think, funds that they might have received through the pandemic. So with no increase in the levy for the village, I think they'll still have increases. Well, maybe not. I was going to say for the fire and police, but that might be their overall levy. So they might not have any levy at all. So with a 5% levy for the library, and then the village doing no levy increase, the total increase to the taxpayers for that tax levy, combined levy for village, police, fire, and library would be 1.06% increase for the taxpayers. So it's kind of a, we're trying to be conservative, like Billy's using market data to get a more precise number. The 5.9 number is what he feels we need to be at to maintain market level going forward. Not go ahead of it, but maintain it market. And then we look at a 5% levy, like what can the taxpayers bear, right? 5% overall in increase in expenses going into next year. As CPI starting to come down, that may be optimistic to say, okay, are we going to be at 5% or less next year? We'll have to see that. But that's kind of where this projection is, with some increases in that. But then again, this is the first draft of the budget. I'd like to hear what you all think, how you all feel about these numbers. You look at more, higher or lower. There is an opportunity with the village doing zero levy, so we can maintain market, as Billy said, market data for the people budget, but then also maintain a fair level of growth for the increase in cost and supplies and products itself. So that's kind of where we're at with this.
So Jeremy, we now get about 4.8% of the tax levy. So you're saying we might get 5%?
We get about, we're probably about 5% of the total tax burden, that's including school districts, library, township, everything. We're about 5% of the total. I think
Okay,
that's similar to the Park District.
Okay, I thought it was like about 4.8, but thank you.
Yeah, I think it's been increased a little bit. I can get those numbers more specific for you. Well, this year's numbers, I guess.
And once again, if I say that if the tax dollars don't come in November, we're fine through February, so we're fine.
Yeah, we're gonna have things in place to where if we don't get the distributions, we're gonna be ready to go through first quarter into the second quarter with we'll have a backup plan in place for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing, Ted, that's worth noting, you mentioned about 5% of the overall tax burden, right, for the taxpayers, part. That's what the library's portion is of the overall tax bill. The village levies for police, fire, the village, and the library. So our portion of what the village levies, forget about the school districts, townships, our portion of what the village levies is about 24%. And that's where it's a larger number. 5% increase for the library for the overall tax burden is very small. 5% levy for what the village levies for us is a little bit bigger. That's where you get to 1.6%. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions on that? I know there's a lot in there, and it's a lot of numbers. Main numbers to keep an eye on is the budget 2023, and then the totals at the end there. And then again, welcome feedback on, are we being too conservative with the projected expenses going into next year? And we'll have more discussions with the management team as well to see where they're at within their individual areas. But the main focus on this was the any numbers that we have, the big numbers like insurance, but then the biggest question of all is with Billy and the people budget.
That somehow sounded like a band name or something. Billy and the people budget.
So if this is acceptable, our projections of 5%, where we don't have other info, we'll come back with refined numbers on all of this, along with Billy's scenarios that you've asked for September. Does that sound acceptable to everyone?
Yes, one quick question. Where in this portion is the benefits piece? And how that might be impacted?
Go ahead,
it's in the people budget. I think Jeremy's trying to scroll to it now. It's in the people budget. It's the second line under wages and salary. It's I put a placeholder number in there of 3% increase. I will also be doing work in September to figure out kind of where does that number need to move if we're going to potentially add additional staff members for insurance. 3% again is just like it's like status quo. That's what we need just to cover the rising cost of insurance. If you're talking about
3%, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing. That line. Gotcha.
Yeah, 3%, 3.01% was.
Now, thank you.
Yeah, just a placeholder number. I'll work on putting a number that I'm recommending for the next draft of the budget. If we're looking at adding some staff to insurance or eligibility for insurance, what would that look like? What do I think I might need there? Again, you kind of play around with, I shouldn't say play around. You go through different scenarios, like when you adjust one line, do you need to adjust another? And so before I went too far down that path, I wanted to have this first conversation, and then now I have more information, so I can put together that second draft.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
How far in advance of the September meeting do we think we could have something to look over? My brain just does not move that fast with all of these numbers, and
I'd like more time to stare at the Excel spreadsheet and make sense of the math, if that's possible. I know you guys are doing a lot of math and you actually have to do the math.
Well,
so.
it's a little harder, Virginia, because we're having a late August meeting. How far in advance would you like to see it? Typically, we send the packet out the Friday before. How many more days in advance would you want?
Whatever you can give me. I know it's a big ask. Just any extra amount of time, just because we had, a couple of different things on the agenda today. I don't think I got to dive in as deep as I really wanted to, especially with it being a first pass. I didn't scrutinize it the way that I feel like I should have. And so if we're getting more specifics the next time around, especially if we're getting multiple scenarios, I would appreciate any extra hours you can eke out, that would let me and everybody else kind of dive in a little bit more.
Oh, I appreciate that. We'll do our best. We'll try and get it out earlier than typical.
Thank you.
And let me know too if this is helpful to see the full spreadsheets with the projections going out 5 years. And then going back as far as I do here, just get some history on to where we were through the pandemic, where we're at now with interest rates and CPI inflation the way it is, and then going forward with some crystal ball projections. We can certainly simplify this too. If you want to see some different scenarios, we can do some side-by-sides of just the 2023 budget. So that's something, just let Lori know what would be helpful. And we can certainly pull up some spreadsheets like that too.
I did have one other question on what something was. There was something in the 2020 actual for online tools that then poofed and disappeared out of all of the subsequent budgets. I just wanted to know kind of what that covered, if that got absorbed. It's under, I think, materials. I think you just scrolled past it. I just wanted to know if that got absorbed by other aspects. Yeah, other aspects of materials. Or if that was sort of a pandemic related online tools item, or where that kind of went.
I think this is where you see this big increase here. So this line was merged in with the digital and streaming content. Sorry. This number here, this year, this budget line, we just combined it both into digital and streaming content during the pandemic, when we increased the number of digital streaming platforms that we have. So that's where you see that number.
Okay.
So just the online tools moved from one category.
Yeah, basically we just purchased through the same thing. It was easier to manage, and there was so much crossover between those two account lines that Elizabeth said, yeah, we can just put those into the same basket, so to speak. If you look back at the previous budgets, there's notes on that as well. And then some of it you'll see here too, print materials going up 5%. Yeah, so we'll see how those numbers go up. Print material in 2021, it went up substantially. Digital streaming content went up substantially as well, but then online tools became part of that. So we're maintaining quite a bit of print. Any questions on it? And if you are going through this and you like seeing the spreadsheets late at night, you come up with some questions, send them to Lori, and we can be prepared to answer some of those questions for you if there's specific questions on how some of that stuff moves.
Thanks, Jeremy. So Elizabeth has sent you links for a closed session. I think you will need to move to go to closed session. It's not on the agenda, but you'll have to make a motion.
Do we know if Madrima is going to be able to go to the
She has
sessions?
she has not responded to my text or my Facebook message. So,
She sounds pretty bad.
yeah, she was. It's not even. Let's see here. Yeah, it's not even showing as that it has been read. It's just showing it's been delivered. So, she said she was getting progressively worse through the day, so she may be already out. So, but I think it's fair that to move into closed session.
So, Matt, may I move that we can have a closed session even after, we don't need a 48-hour.
No, we are allowed to move an item of discussion into closed session.
Okay, so may I move that we move into closed session?
It is moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Christina. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Ted, will you take the roll call vote, please?
Yes, to move into closed session. May I ask Matt Fruth?
Yes.
Ted Foss, yes. Christina?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yes.
Virginia?
Yes.
And Suzanne?
Yes.
All right. All right, I will see you over there.
Okay, and I hope that we can get this.
We got an email, right? You said? The link.
Yeah, you should all have a link in your email.
Okay, thanks.
Recording in progress.
Hello?
Hey Ted, it's Jody. Did you get the email with the closed session link? Because I think all the other trustees are in the closed session right now.
I thought this was the closed session.
I'm sorry, I have it on my telephone, but not on my computer.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So Ted, please disconnect from this session because this session is still going on.
I have it on my telephone, and I can hear you on my computer, but I don't see it. So
Hello again. We'll give Suzanne a chance to join back to honor her efforts to join us before we adjourn. Lori, Billy, I'd like to have a chance to talk with you tomorrow. You can shoot me a calendar invite. Let me take a quick look at what my work calendar is. I know I have something. I have something at 10 and 3. Otherwise, my day is open. So try and just send me an invite for when it works for you. Otherwise, and kind of get you up to date. And otherwise, we are set and we have completed our posted agenda for the evening, and we are adjourned.
Good night.